All right, so then biggest issue here tonight, the animals issue. Just kind of tell us, what did you learn through the
Well,
public input?
we actually learned a lot. We knew going into this process in December that we were going to have to make some adjustments. We did not intend to draft or to pass the ordinance as it was originally drafted, which is why we put off the decision to engage the public and get some feedback, because a lot of the animals on the list are people's pets and people already have them. And so knowing that there was going to be some widespread concern, we first wanted to learn a little bit about what the core problem was that we're trying to solve. We've covered that. But then we also need to figure out where we can find a reasonable compromise between an invasive ordinance that tells people how to live in their home and what type of pet they can have, which is what we absolutely don't want to do, and something that then reasonably protects public safety and accomplishes what we're trying to accomplish. Now, whether or not that true compromise exists, we are going to find out. The committee did not act tonight. We were just going to take public feedback and then send the entire ordinance back for redrafting to the legal office, which is what they did tonight. And so if we can find that compromise in our second draft, we'll review another draft in April. And if we can't get that list pared down to the point where it's reasonable, where things that people have commonly as pets, like reptiles, that type of stuff, I think the regulation on them has to be walked back almost completely, because if you try to manage them by size, you create different problems. If you try to ban them entirely, you create other problems. And so knowing these things are already in our midst, you can't pass something that is so invasive that people have to rehome their pets like in a day or two. You just can't do that. And so knowing that, we had a lot of animal advocates turn out tonight that were very insightful, and their feedback was valuable to this process, because we need to know. We also had someone bring in sugar gliders. Many of us had never seen them before. And so I think that it was a learning opportunity for the committee, but we also have to figure out really how large the threat to public safety truly is. Even if one of these animals, whatever it would be, would escape containment, what is the real public threat, and is that enough to warrant an ordinance against a laundry list of these things? And so tonight we couldn't justify that it was. And so I think that going back to the drawing board and reworking it a little bit to see if we can find a policy that works, makes sense. But when we come back to the table in April with a draft, if we still don't feel that that's a reasonable solution, the committee won't pass it just to pass something. They really want a well thought out process. And so that's why we didn't act on it tonight.
Because it seemed like a lot of the input, especially from the UWSP students, it seemed like there's a lot of misconceptions here. There's a lot of misunderstandings
Yes.
here. And were those, some of those insights that you got tonight, just as somebody on the committee, how much is that going to help you?
It's incredibly helpful. I think the first time we talked about it in December, we didn't have anyone in the audience that had come for public comment. And if we had made a decision that night, our decision would have been incredibly short-sighted, and we knew that. We knew that we wanted to hear from pet owners, and we wanted to hear from animal advocates. We also wanted to hear from the humane officer who manages these things with people on a day-to-day basis. And so getting that insight, that helps us determine what direction we want to go. I suspect that we're moving in a way more conservative direction in terms of policy making. Our goal, we always want the least invasive solution first. And so the solution that solves a problem without impacting, hundreds of people and how they keep their pets in their homes. Half of these pets that exist in homes are never out in public anyway. And so to make a policy against them just doesn't make sense. And so I think that to pull it back and rethink it, it was the only smart move we could make tonight.
So when you're talking about from a public safety standpoint, then your biggest concern, I'm guessing, is this animal getting loose and then suddenly harming one of the neighbors or somebody else in the neighborhood.
The concern with the situation that gave rise to this in the first place was when someone had a fox that they were keeping as a domestic pet. That animal escaped containment, and then obviously that animal can't be vaccinated for rabies. So when it bites, you don't know if it's got it or not. So the only choice we would have had would be to put the officer who was bitten through a series of rabies vaccinations, or test the fox. The only way you can test an animal is post-mortem. They have to test the brain. So that's what happened. They ended up euthanizing the fox, testing it. Turned out it didn't have rabies. Everything was fine. That was life-altering for the people who had to give up their pet for that testing. That said, they were attached to the pet, but there's no good way to vaccinate those animals. You can't vaccinate those animals for rabies. So if people are harboring them in homes, they too are exposed, just like any animal that's out in the wild to contracting that disease as well. So
Now, when you look at the animals on the list, there's about 20 animals on the list. Is your goal then going to be to kind of pare it down to something a little more manageable, or what is the future of this ordinance?
I think pare it down, but we also have to be more reasonable in how exhaustive a list it is. I think that large animals that require USDA licensure, which we talked about tonight, we had a zoological expert in tonight that talked to us about the practicality of putting, large animals that are of a, scale that are typically kept in a zoo on our list. Is it proactive? Well, we didn't have that problem in the first place, so it may seem silly that all of those animals appear on the list, but I think that when you draft an ordinance like that, I think the assumption is that whatever you don't put on the list is what ultimately will show up, and then you can't manage it. I think there's a compromise to land somewhere in the middle, but I also think that the list was so complete that it really did have the effect of freezing out people who have, pets that don't bother anyone, that, would suddenly be, their world would be really upset because they'd either have to rehome the animals or something like that, and that's not our goal.
So then what exactly is the next timeline that you're looking at with the ordinance then?
The next meeting to look at a new draft would be the 22nd of April. In this committee meeting, again, we'll look at a draft. If we don't feel that draft gets us where we want to go, or that it represents a reasonable solution, the committee will probably abandon the process of trying to create an ordinance for stuff like that. We don't want to create an ordinance just to pass something that is invasive and doesn't get where we need to go, or that is so broad and so far-reaching that it just impacts too many people in a negative way, and that's not what we're here for.
So then between now and then, what are you going to do? Is it going to be some more education, or are you going to reach out to maybe some of these people that spoke tonight
Yep, the
again?
assistant city attorney is going to do some more research. She's got a few more ordinance samples from other areas. She did take the names of a few of the experts that talked with us tonight. She wants to talk to them further. A number of them offered contact information. We'll be reaching out to them. We're going to get some additional feedback from the humane officer, which she was involved in it to start with, but we want to get a little more insight from her as we walk through the process and see what we can come up with for a revision. So,
Anything else we should know then before we let you go?
no, I think it's going to be kind of a wait and see. I'm glad they didn't make a decision tonight because I think that none of the materials are ready for prime time yet. They're just not. So,
All right. Look forward to it.
thank you.